Hi everyone.
Hi.
Alright, today we're going to be doing the Malazan Reader Tag. I have my fiance here with me, Nat, used chicken, as the case may be. We are going to do a No Life Forsaken discussion at some point, but Nat, you just finished yesterday.
I finished it last night. I need some time to let the thoughts
you can
percolate.
marinate and we can come up with a good sort of guiding discussion. But I thought for this week we could do a spoiler-free Malazan video, since my last video was spoiler-full. Could follow it up with a video that more people can watch than just people who have finished No Life Forsaken. According to Goodreads, is only 400 people.
But that's like basically all the views you got on your last video too.
Yeah,
So,
so like every single person who read No Life Forsaken watched my video.
That's how I choose to interpret it, yeah.
This tag was created by Counsellor of Moonspawn.
Oh, cool, okay.
Question number 1. How did you find out about Malazan?
I found out about Malazan, I think probably the same way you did, where I was like looking for some good fantasy stories to read, and I was just looking online and I kept seeing Malazan at or near the top of lots of people's lists, and I was like, this seems like a good thing to do.
I started reading Malazan after I finished Wheel of Time. It was like the biggest series after Wheel of Time that was completed. A series with a vast backstory and lore and world building, and that's what I got with Malazan. Even though those stories, as I've said many times, are very, very different. The next question is, describe your experience reading it for the first time.
So I started Gardens of the Moon in high school. I want to say I was 15 or 16. I totally had no idea what was going on, which is, part of the joy of reading Malazan. And I think at that age I was like starting to appreciate that as part of the reading experience. I was doing a mix of listening to the audiobook, and I also had it on Kindle. My two most vivid memories are walking around my neighborhood listening to the audiobook, and I think specifically listening, and this isn't a spoiler because it's like the first chapter, listening to the section in Itko Khan with the hounds. It was like a chilly fall day, and that really stuck with me. And the other thing I remember is that year I went to Barcelona with my family. We had family who were there. They had a nice apartment there, and they had this hammock on a balcony in their apartment. And I remember sitting with my Kindle in that little hammock and reading Gardens of the Moon, and just feeling totally like absorbed in the world and also very comfortable.
That's so lovely. I read Gardens of the Moon during COVID. I remember I had the paperback version that has the really funny illustration of Paran
where he's like the totally generic fantasy protagonist looking.
I think that cover is funny because it really leads you to believe that Malazan is just like a generic fantasy sword and sorcery vibe, and it's so completely different. My main memory from that is being very confused. However, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I'm reading 2666 by Roberto Bolaño, and I think there's so much value in reading books that you don't understand.
Not only is it valuable, but I also really enjoy that feeling of just being totally lost in this world and feeling like the endless possibilities of what's going on, what could happen. Question
number 3. When did you realize this series was going to be an all-time favorite? This is a funny question to put in a tag because it sort of presumes that it's going to be, that it's an all-time favorite.
Correct presumption.
And I think that if you stick through with Malazan and finish all 10 books, like there has to be a level of dedication that it is going to be an all-time favorite, but it's just funny that that's a question.
I mean, I think it really is. Like, if you've read the whole series, it's an all-time favorite. Like, I can't imagine a person who has read the whole series and it's not, like, very close to the top
why would
for
you
them.
spend that much time reading it if it wasn't? But I would say for me, it was definitely Midnight Tides. I think Midnight Tides was when I understood what Malazan was going for, and where I really felt the scale of the series.
For me, it was easy to pinpoint. It was the end of Memories of Ice, because I think that shows the depth of emotion that Erikson is able to bring out with some of these really bombastic, over-the-top fantasy moments. And I think it also shows like the grand archaeological timescale of the series, which is something that in my experience is just totally unique to Malazan.
I say this about every book, but I think I'm most excited to reread the ending of Memories of Ice. What is your favorite aspect of the series? I really like how Malazan balances these very deep, thematic, and complex discussions about slavery, religion, trauma, how it has those conversations over the span of so many different books, and how that conversation is constantly evolving and has so much nuance. and how that conversation happens in a necessarily fantastical way, and how it's like very much of the fantasy genre. It takes the like attributes of fantasy very seriously and applies so much method and care to executing the world building and the lore. Yeah, it just feels like whenever I read Malazan, it feels like I'm reading just the thin layer over this world that goes so much deeper.
They somehow managed to suggest so much more going on that you're not seeing.
Yeah.
I also kind of spoiled my answer with my last answer, because I think really the time scale and the scope of the world building, one of the many things I love about the series, but what I think is maybe the most unique about the series, and I think that, you know, obviously comes from his training as an anthropologist. He is clearly thinking very hard about how these cultures, and he and Esselmont, I think, really are thinking very hard about how these cultures would come to be, what they would be like, and there's so much variety in the cultures of the world and the universe of Malazan. Every time you hear about some character who's 500,000 years old and like some completely forgotten culture, and the way that he sort of uses that to comment on historiography too, I think that happens a lot. You know, he's talking about like the tendency to assume that history is just this constant progression upward.
Yeah. And you see that happen in the actual books where the events of the Book of the Fallen show up in The God Is Not Willing in a warped way, and you're, as a reader, you're like, wait, I read this happen, and this is not how it went down, or like this is like a very warped way of viewing these events that you as a reader witnessed. Nothing is truly perfect. Share a little gripe you have with Malazan.
And this is like so unoriginal, but it probably is just the romance in the series. I don't think is particularly strong. It's definitely a lot better than certain other authors of really long fantasy series. Yeah, I don't think it's Erickson's strength. I mean, this is like a constant meme in the community that he writes like friendship duos way better than he writes romance, and I agree with that.
I think my gripe would be, I think Erickson will often introduce a character who's really cool, and then we just spend like a chapter or two with them, and then they leave and never come back. And that happens in No Life Forsaken, in The God Is Not Willing to a lesser extent, throughout the Book of the Fallen as well. That's why I think books like No Life Forsaken are actually quite fun, where you get to see characters come back, because there is always that possibility of the character returning. What are your favorite and least favorite installments? Did my ranking quite recently, and I put Reaper's Gale as my least favorite, which is crazy because I think Reaper's Gale actually has a lot to recommend it. In a series, you have to have a least favorite, and I guess that's my least favorite. And it's definitely like a Rainwild situation, where Rainwild's is Robin Hobb's like least developed work, but it's still really good.
It's very short, it's very different, so I'm not gonna do that, even though that probably is the right answer. I think my actual bottom rank would be Dust of Dreams, and I think so much of that is that's a book I would appreciate a lot more on a second read.
Might be recency bias, but if it was recency bias, it would have been No Life Forsaken. But I think The God Is Not Willing is my favorite.
The God Is Not Willing is also my favorite, and it's not recency bias for me because I read it when it came out. Some of his sharpest dialogue writing. It is one of his most like pointed books thematically.
I also think that The God Is Not Willing, it works as metaphor and as allegory to the real world, but I actually think that the most interesting lens with which to look at The God Is Not Willing is just taking it for the logic of the world and looking at as if gods and these things actually did exist, and not like trying to extrapolate into like the real world situation, which is something that I've done in the past. And you know, the more that I think of The God Is Not Willing, the more that I think it's just interesting as its face value, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
How many times have you read the series?
Only once. I'm on my second read right now, on I think chapter 5 of my Gardens of the Moon reread. I don't think that this reread will be my last time reading the series.
I have also only read the series once, and I have plans to reread it soon. Besides Malazan Book of the Fallen, what other series from the Malazan world have you read? I have not read anything except for the Witness trilogy, or quartet now.
I've read the Book of the Fallen, I've read Forge of Darkness, I haven't gotten to Fall of Light yet. I'm God Is Not Willing, No Life Forsaken, first Corbel Broach and Beauchelain novella.
What are your reading interests beyond Malazan?
I like a lot of fantasy. I like literary fiction. I really like old like mythology as well. Might have there's like this whole section right behind me. But yes, I did minor in classics in college. Love the Iliad, the Odyssey, but I also just really love like the old Hesiod, like the Theogony, the Works and Days. Yeah, and I think that probably does inform my appreciation of Erickson's world building to an extent, because I really like that like mythological scope.
Been on this channel before, I would talk about Wheel of Time, Realm of the Elderlings. Those are some of my other favorite fantasy books, and then recently I've been branching out more into other things like nonfiction. Not so much this year. I didn't read a lot of nonfiction this year.
Yeah, you were reading a ton of nonfiction last year though.
Yeah, this year I kind of fell off. I think it's because I tried to read The Making of the Atomic Bomb, which is sort of like a Malazan nonfiction. It's just really long. I'm still reading it, but I haven't finished it, and so that kind of put a stopper on my nonfiction. What advice would you give to a first-time reader? I said this earlier, but I think there's a lot of value in working through a book that you don't fully understand, and that goes for Gravity's Rainbow or Finnegan's Wake as much as Malazan.
Like, not only work through it, but sort of embrace it, learn to enjoy that feeling. Don't Google anything. It is so easy to get spoiled on Malazan. I remember I was like trying to remember a character's name. This is like middle of the series, and I Googled and I got huge spoilers for several things. And, you know, on the one hand, that didn't really have a huge negative impact on my experience. But if you do want to be surprised, do not Google anything. It's so easy to get spoiled on stuff.
Thanks so much for watching this Malazan Reader Tag. We will catch you in the next video. Until then, take care.